The candidates for November are set.
I know Donald Trump's type.
Between now and Election Day,
we are not going back.
A campaign season unfolding faster.
Kamala Harris is not getting a promotion
Than any in recent history.
Make America great again.
Follow it all with new episodes every weekday on the NPR Politics Podcast.
Hi, I'm Paul J. Aguilar, news editor at The Vidette, the student voice of Illinois State University and a reporter for WGLT. Welcome to Democracy's Future, a joint project between The Vidette and WGLT News. We hear from the students who will help chart the future of our democracy. On this episode of Democracy's Future, early voting is underway. But how much do college students know about the voting process? It's a first time for many of them. ISU's Center for Civic Engagement has been working with the McLean County Clerk's office to help boost voter education on campus ahead of the election. Center Director Kathy Strezpeck and County Clerk Kathy Michael spoke with Vidette editor Mia Saras. First, Strezpeck says she explains to students how their vote can make a difference.
And I think about a lot of our local ordinances that are really important to students. So, and even advocacy issues too. But if you think about things like local roads and who the judges are. So if you get a traffic ticket or something like that, and you're going before a judge who would be elected. And other things like just thinking about our representation at the state level and at the federal level, that's also really important for students to advocate for things like student loans, other things that really affect their daily life. And then we also know that voting is a habit. So once students start to vote, they tend to continue to vote later in their lives. And so that's something really important. If we could start that habit here, then students tend to be voters for their lives, which is important.
A good point that Katie mentioned as well is to vote all the way down the ticket. We are attracted to the presidential and the higher up candidates because they get all the publicity, let's face it. But keep in mind, if your parents live here or your relatives or you decide to locate here, nothing as important, in my opinion, they're all important, is your county board races. And those are the ones that could be very, very close. They decide where your taxes are going, or your parents' taxes, or your grandparents. So that can affect you. Don't think that won't make a difference for a lot of people if you vote all the way down the ballot. And this year, if you agree or disagree, but I think even the presidential could be a very tight race. So every vote is going to count for sure.
ISU has had really long lines on election days in the past. How are you prepared to handle a large rush of students voting on election day? This could be for either of you.
We've had really long lines, I can remember, in one particular election, and that was 2020, and since working with the Civic Engagement group, and that's right when same-day registration kicked in as well, which really caused long lines, and people were very patient and got through those okay. Since then, I think things have gone well. There's going to be lines no matter where you go, especially in this election. March, I think we had one of the lowest turnouts that we've ever seen, so no long lines there. But be ready for long lines, and that's why if you feel comfortable, early vote or vote by mail. Other than that, we have enough judges this time. It's amazing the response of the judges that we have. In fact, normally at ISU we'll have between 20 and 30 with the group that works with them specifically. Each election they requested 40, and we've got at least 40. And we have more equipment. Each election we've asked, do you need more equipment? And when affordable, which it usually is with grants, we'll try to send more equipment out there to help avoid the lines as well. I do want to mention, too, about the ballots on our website as well. Your individual ballot is now accessible rather than the sample ballot that just shows everything. So if you want to get specific for your group as well, go on there, click in your address, and it'll show you exactly who you are voting for, which has become very popular. 2016, I stand corrected. Thank you.
So I will just, add to that we appreciate the work of the clerk's office to really help those same-day voters, because that is a good chance for our students. And at the same time, like Kathy said, we really encourage students to register in advance. And we have had multiple voter registration tables already on campus, and we will continue with that. And we're glad to have our voter engagement interns help go to any student group or event and help get students registered, because that really does help save time. And then also, if people are able to research their individual ballot in advance, then they don't spend as much time perhaps when they are voting, because they already know who they're going to vote for. And so that's helpful too. And just all of the options that we have, with early voting, vote by mail, as much as we can educate students about that options. I agree with Kathy, there may still be long lines because that tends to happen during a presidential election, especially during a highly contested one. But we think democracy works best when everyone can participate. And so we're just trying to give as many ways to make the vote accessible as possible.
You mentioned interns. Are there opportunities for students to volunteer in voter outreach programs or work at polling stations?
Yes, so we do have students who have volunteered as, poll workers, election judges, and then at the Center for Civic Engagement, we have voter engagement interns. We also have students on our voter engagement coalition. So there are lots of ways that students can become involved. And then, sometimes students also go, our office is nonpartisan, but our ISU students do sometimes work on political campaigns. And there's so many ways that students can become involved.
And apply to be an election judge as well. While we have a lot of judges, life happens and we get cancellations at the last minute. And wouldn't it be fun and interesting and educational to work, your student to work at ISU on Election Day or early voting? I think that would be pretty exciting. So contact our office, we'll send you the application, and you can take your training online.
Is that a paid position? Is that a volunteer?
It is paid $220. It's a long day, but it's nice to be able to pay for that as well.
What would that day entail if someone signed
That's
up?
being on the job at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then you can't leave the premise, so you bring your lunch, and we tell you where the refrigerators are and everything. You meet an awful lot of nice people while you're working there as well. So the long day, polls close at 7 o'clock, and you'd think you could walk out the door at 7, but you help kind of close up. And if there's long lines before 7, every one of those people in line get to vote. So it could be many years ago, I don't want to scare anybody, it'd be 11 o'clock before we're out of there. Now, pretty much you can look at 8, 9, 10, but no promises. And you get the flat rate of $220.
How are polling locations determined?
Well, now that's a good question. There have to be, by statute, I don't know if it was made up 100 years ago or 50 years ago, the state and the county have determined locations, and mostly by township, with how many people live where. So we have, rural townships, some are in Colfax, in fire stations, in libraries, all determined by the state. And we are obligated, of course, by statute to have at least one location on campus. And so that's why we're here as well.
What are the most common misconceptions people have about voting?
Well, here lately, and I'm sure you've all read about it, more lately than ever that I've seen, is the mistrust of the voting process, the possibilities of fraud. We fortunately quell those pretty quickly. And how do we do that? Because we've never had any fraud or suppression or any record thereof. And as I say, often we aim to keep it that way. We encourage poll watchers. Poll watchers are good to have. They keep an eye on us. Whether we think that we're the most honest people in the world, it's good to keep an eye on them. Trust but verify. And we're very proud of our reputation here, but that's been the main thing. And this time there's going to be misinformation and disinformation. We have social media monitors to try to quell anything, because those folks are going to try to scare you from voting. And we want to really try to, by working with the media and all the organizations, to stop that. Don't be afraid to vote.
I think sometimes people also have the perception that their vote doesn't make a difference, but we know that is absolutely not true. I mean, there are many elections that have been decided by just a few votes. Some of our local elections have been decided by a few votes. And when I talk to students, I always say there are over 20,000 of you. Imagine if all of you who are eligible to vote voted. You would absolutely change things in our community. And students have always been at the forefront of civil rights movements and a lot of really important social movements in our country. And so I just like to remind people of that and really get them excited about voting.
And then just going back to you, Kathy, are you concerned about the threat of hostility from voters on Election Day, and how would you train a poll worker for that?
Well, we're concerned. We're always concerned every election of what might happen. Of course, there's a lot more of that out there this time. I think the turnout of people who have signed up to be election judges, they feel safe and confident in our local law enforcement. We have plans in place that, for obvious reasons, I won't detail, but our judges are trained specifically on how to handle certain situations, what phone numbers to call. We've met with all of our local and rural law enforcement to just be on the ready, what numbers to call, and things like that. So we're ready for anything, but always on guard and concerned.
What advice do you have for someone who's hesitant to vote or doesn't feel like their vote matters?
I think personal responsibility weighs in. I think it's easy sometimes to get tired of all the back and forth, where you just want to turn off. Of course, we never turn off the radio, but you might want to turn off the TV. Don't get sick of it. I mean, this is our lives. This is going to tell us what our future is going to be like. So don't give up on that. Be positive. And who knows, in a few years, you might think that you can make a difference too, and you might want to run.
I also try to tell students stories of inspiring people who fought for voting rights. I mean, if you think about when ISU was founded, when I go to speak to a typical classroom, many of us in that room, myself included, would not have had the right to vote. So there are many people who fought and even died and gave their lives for voting rights. So I think it's really important for us to think about that and to think about that responsibility. And also, I sometimes will tell stories about times when one vote really did make a difference. And I think that being able to see the positive pieces of voting, we try to celebrate democracy in our office. So we try to do some things to make voting fun. Like we have a selfie station, and it's really a joy to me to see students walking out of the polling place just like smiling, having their picture taken, wearing their I voted sticker. And so we can help students, and we can help teach them about the issues, and we can even help them brainstorm like what matters to you, what issues are most important to you, and then help teach them how to research what the candidate's position on that is. We have so many great opportunities. Our local elected officials, they love to talk to students. They are always open for students to come in or write them a letter or an email. And I think it's powerful when students get a letter back or a call back. They realize that their voice does matter, and they really can make a difference.
What percentage of voter turnout do you predict for this election?
I predict a record breaker. I think one of the highest presidentials we've had hit 80% in many of our polling place locations. And I'm guessing maybe going back to 2016, where we hit 80%. And I can imagine that we're doing that. We've had the hugest response of the vote by mail applications coming back, hundreds. And voter registration, because of the voter registration drives going on here at ISU and elsewhere, stacks, I would say hundreds, have come in already from the ISU campus. It's more than I've ever seen in my 14 years. So I'm going with 80%. I was tempted to go a little bit higher, but I'll stay with 80% for now. What do you think, Katie?
I mean, I also think we will have a record turnout. We had a big turnout for the 2022 election, and ISU was voted one of the most improved campuses for voter turnout in the 2022 midterm election, and I expect that to continue. So I hope it does.
And then I just have one more question. Some election offices reported a big boost in voter registration after Taylor Swift made her presidential endorsement. Did McLean County notice any increase then?
In voter registration?
Yeah.
Huge. But I can't tell you that that's Taylor Swift. But now that you've made that correlation, it is rather interesting that we got the highest stack of applications that we've ever received. So people can say it was Taylor Swift or some other debate reason. But that's an interesting question because it was a huge increase a few days following that. A visual, after 14 years, I saw this stack come in, and of course you can't get the visual here on the radio, but let's just say it was a foot tall, and that's the biggest one I've ever seen. In fact, we all kind of went, whoa, and so that'll be very interesting to see the turnout when we get the final numbers of Democratic versus Republican. This has always been a very strong Republican county that is moving. It is moving. We have a tie. 10-10 on our county board, 10 Republicans, 10 Democrats. It's over the past years, it's been 20-3. Then it moved up to, 8 to whatever. I failed math in college, 12. And so that's very interesting, too. What's the turnout going to be? Republican versus Democrat in McLean County. It could shift the entire county.
That was McLean County Clerk Kathy Michael and Kathy Strespekh from ISU's Center for Civic Engagement speaking with student editor Mia Saras. We'll have another episode of Democracy's Future coming soon. We've reached out to both candidates who are running for an Illinois legislative race that represents much of Bloomington Normal. Our thanks to audio producer Bren McMonigal, WGLT Digital Content Director Ryan Denham, and WGLT News Director Eric Stock. Please give us your feedback on this series and let us know if there are certain issues you'd like us to explore. Email us at news@wglt.org. Subscribe to Democracy's Future on the NPR app or wherever you listen. Until next time, I'm Paul J. Aguilar. Thank you for listening.